If you don't know me, I'm CTO of Searchmetrics, so I'm the nerd here from Searchmetrics. So you can, come to me and start doing tech talk. Like Doug already said, we are a company. We all do everything we do with love out of all the cities we're in. Okay, so let's start with the real content. And as you know me and Searchmetrics, we are heavily investing a lot of time in research. And we started this many, many years ago. And of course, the general kind of like world is all about ranking factors. And the reason is quite simple, because when I started doing SEO in 2001, for me, it was really all about finding out what kind of like moves rankings. In 2001, it was quite simple. A lot of links from forums. Some content hidden on the page. White font on a white background. Super easy. Many people maybe remember that. And it's still very similar. I mean, not with the same tactics, but with this idea of figuring out what can I learn and how can I scale it on my site or with my company. But when it comes to search engine ranking factors, there's some quotes from people like, hey, search engine ranking fictions, or it's dumb to come up with ranking factors in general, and then it's even dumber to do it on a total scale. It's like, why are these people, saying this? I don't know. I mean, I don't know their Twitter names, the people behind, but it's something that made me think. And then I looked at things like that are very generic, like ranking factors like how fast is a page, like page load time. And if you look at some numbers, so I compared just 2016 and 17, you see that on average, most pages got faster. Okay, just take this as an information now. Let's continue with the quotes. These ranking factor lists need to die a horrible death, or word count is a silly metric for any industries. Like, why? Okay, let's take a look at word count again. If you look at the numbers here, just look at the average increase from 1,300 to 1,900 in 2017. The general idea would be, okay, content became more important because Google ranks more pages quite well with more content on their page. So faster pages, more content. So if you go back now to your office, your business, you need to improve your speed and you just need to write more content. But it's not that easy, because many years ago we already, invested a lot of time in looking at, the differences of, businesses and different ranking factors. So that came out in a study in 2016 the first time, and since then we have invested in something we now call niche ranking factors or micro ranking factors. Okay, so what is it actually? I mean, if you look at content or websites or SEO as a term, the audiences are super important, as you all know, right? I mean, when you want to, or when you make your customer or user happy, that's something Google appreciates, that you appreciate. When people stay longer on your site, when they, click on some of the following links on your site, that's something that you do want. And that's why you can't optimize everything for everyone. You have to understand your audience. And that's something I'm going to explain you a little bit more in what I mentioned before in niche ranking factors. So what I did is I took a lot of different topics out of my life. I thought I'm the subject matter experts in some of these topics. And I conducted ranking factor analysis on these very specific topics. And it's actually quite cool, because you will see very quickly that looking at this gives us a lot of precision. It's way better than just saying in general, you need to have a faster page. You do need to have a fast page, of course, but it really depends on your industry. Okay, cool. Nice theory. Show me some data. So let's start with 3 different areas where they somehow belong together and somehow they're not, right? I mean, dating and divorcing somehow belongs together, but looking at the timeline could be one way or the other. And love goes through the stomach. As we all know, recipes are having a big impact on that. And the first ranking factor here is what I took is microdata. Why microdata? Because when you look at smart speakers, and we have some cool speakers here who talk about structured data and microdata, voice search, and all these things. So microdata is one element how to structure data on your page. But the question here is this something you can generalize again and see this as a ranking factor? So let's look at the data. So how to read the data? It's actually quite simple. On the x-axis, you see the position. This is number 1, so it starts from the left. And on the right, you see position number 20. So it means when you look at the y-axis, you see position 1, all the values on average. And you see here, the blue line ends here. It's about 22. So it means on all the position 1s for recipes, they had about an average 22 microdata items in their source code on their page. And if you look at dating here, so that's the yellow line, you see they had about an average of 2. So it's a big difference. 2 on average on position 1, 22 on average on position 1 for recipes. So very different. And if you look at the average for the top 10, you see really that in dating, there almost no one is using microdata on their page. Within recipe, almost everybody uses microdata. It doesn't mean there's now the chance for the dating space to really invest in microdata, because you have to look at the audience and how microdata is used. So I have 2 examples for you. If you search for dating websites for free, you see that the search results, they look very classic, like very traditional. A lot of, just blue links, and there are only 2 integrations that Google shows, and one is from iTunes, so which is not a dating website, it's for an app. So it means in dating, microdata is not used that much. If you search for a recipe and look at how Google displays the rankings, looks very different. You see ratings for recipes, the calorie count, the time you need for the recipe, etc. So here you see Google is displaying on 8 out of 10 results for this example, pages that do use schema integrations. So let's just digest this, because microdata is important, especially when it comes to voice search and all these new ways to search for information where structured data is important for a search engine to extract information, but it doesn't apply for every industry. So let's continue with some examples. Internal links. Let's take 2 very different topics again. So one is more like, for the nerds, like, car tuning, really kind of like invest in your car. And the other one is more lawyer content, content written by serious people. When you look at internal links, the reason I mention here internal links is because this is the most undervalued discipline in optimizing your site. It is important for the user because it really makes a big difference how many links you display for the user, because they get choices or they get distracted, and for the search engine as well. And that's something that many SEOs do not really understand, because it's complex to really see how the link juice is distributed in your site. But if you look at different industries, the first thing that you will see here, so you see when you look at position 1 to 5 here, for example, there's a slightly higher amount of internal links on position 1 to 5 here than, for example, on the second page of Google. It's very similar to here for car tuning. So this is something, what you can then read out of the data is that internal links, they do have some positive correlation with rankings. But more important is the difference here. Between these 2, there's a very high difference in the amount of internal links. So that's why you can't generalize again how many links you should use. It really depends on your business. And if you have less content, you can optimize your internal links way different than if you have a lot of products. Let me show you this example here. So that's a typical car tuning page with a lot of filters and options, for users to navigate through their page. So more links, more choices. Okay, let's continue with another example, which I believe is very, very important. I mean, we live in a world where Instagram and Twitter and Facebook is heavily influencing how we see and create content, because we want to create content that kind of like has an impact on many different mediums. And I mean, I see many people using their phones all the time, doing selfies or videos all the time. So videos, they do have a big impact. But do they also have a big impact when it comes to rankings? So I looked at these 3 different niches, And when you see the data, it's quite interesting because when you look at the green line, you see that position 1 and 2, on average, they always had at least one video on their page. So it means when you are in a space where, like fitness, where video content is that important and you only have text, for example, it is unlikely that you can be super successful. Whereas if you are in, for example, here divorce, like serious lawyer content, they don't have a video or almost have no video. So the reason is quite simple, because when you look at some examples like weight loss, and you see the first result here, it's 16 ways to lose weight fast. Super appealing headline. If you look at the page, it's super visual, a lot of text, but also a lot of videos and images. And in total, I have 11 videos. There is a reason for that. You know, look at Instagram, YouTube. I mean, all these kind of like mediums that show moving content. And the reason is simple, right? I mean, you want to get fit by looking at, exercises or looking at other people to get inspired. I mean, that's from today in the morning after my gym time. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, let's continue. I know it's a lot of data. The good thing is you will get the link, and every attendee is able to download the slides, so you can take this and show it to your boss. Okay, so let's continue with a little bit more data. So text length. I've mentioned that the word count in general went up. But if you take a look at things like number of paragraphs, that's a way different view on data, because if you have one text, long text, floating text, no structure, versus you put it in paragraphs or a different structure like lists or tables, it makes the picture a little bit more diverse. And if you look at this, you see here in wine, there's not that much text and not that many paragraphs, whereas in divorce, of course, there's a lot of text. And just looking at the differences in the top 10, it's significant, and that's why this example is so impressive. So if you search for things like "I want a divorce," maybe, it has a pretty high search volume, of course. And if you click on mediate.com, first, this page looks really like from the 90s. I mean, seriously, it's like a 90s layout. If you scroll here, it's pretty dry and boring text, and if you start reading it, maybe it's longer than some marriages in the end. And that also makes sense, because when you want to have a divorce, you don't get divorced by looking at a video. You get divorced by making a serious decision. So you want to have serious text, to really think through the things that you're potentially going through. And wine, it's more or less about fun, right? I mean, the example in wine shows this page. It's a nice infographic about the different, kinds of white wine. You have some kind of like, links underneath. Almost no text, no videos, just a nice infographic. So in certain areas, like in wine, it's all about how to enjoy stuff. Okay, a couple more examples before I come to some conclusions and really some nice best practice examples. Lists or tables also have a big difference. In dating or divorce, there are very different usage of structured data like lists or tables. And if you look at an example, almost the last one I have here, that's cheap divorces. If you look at this, it's about a checklist. First this, then this, then this. It's like, okay, I want to go through this process. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's interesting, because if you do something like this, you can really leverage, like classical elements like bullet points or like list elements in your text, and it makes the user happier and likely than search engines too. Okay, divorces are serious and structured dating is fun. Okay, let's skip a couple things, because I have more cool things I really want to show you, and like I said, you can download all these slides. Let me, tell you this. Of course, all these concepts are very theoretical when you're not within these industries, right? If you're not in fitness or divorce or dating or wine or car tuning, etc. Okay, let me show you some best practice examples, what you can do really with, content and SEO. The first strategy here is content specialization, which is quite interesting. Yeah, remember 2013? They got their first baby, but also 2013, there was a page, was super large, about.com. 5 years ago, they had a visibility here of almost 6 million, and now they have 0. And with 6 million visibility points in the US, they were one of the largest pages in the internet, not just in the US. But they did something, and that's actually really something that happened to them. It's called slow death. Slow death is a phenomenon when kind of because of thin content or some other problems, week over week, you lose attraction. But a couple or 2 years ago, they started to kind of invest in diversifying their content. So what happened 2 years ago? Prince George's first day of school, great. But also 2 years ago, about.com, they've split their content, their existing content, onto 9 different new entities. So they've created these new entities like the Balance, the Spruce, very well, and they extracted the already existing content from a domain that was dying, this slow death, and put this on these new domains. They've created a new layout, so they look different, these domains. They look more appealing. I will show you an example. And these new domains now reached a visibility of 4.3 million, which is almost the same height they had 4 years ago, with the same content. But what happened then? Yeah, we are in the UK, so I need to have some royal pictures. It's important. That was mandatory, so Queen Elizabeth sent me an email. I have to do it. Okay, so what happened also is they did it again. So they took verywell.com. This domain was performing quite nice. It had a visibility of 80,000. And this phenomenon here, when it dropped again, is caused by a new content specialization. So they took again content that was on verywell.com and put it on 3 new domains, Verywell Fit, Mind, and Family. And now look at this. They just split the content onto 3 new domains, and these 3 new domains now have almost 3 times the visibility than the original entity. And this is what about.com, they are now called .dash, so about.com as a brand is dead. And this is what they did. I mean, this is one example. So this is the Balance. It's a page, that's one of the entities. It's a page about financial content or financial advices. Looks very dry and boring. That's the page. Almost no images, just straight to the point. But the user intent in that moment is served. And if you click on a different example from the Spruce, that's a recipe page. It really looks very visual. It has a different intent, a lot of pictures, more instructions. So it's very, very different. So the conclusion here is, if you try to sell everything and nothing like about.com, they had content about electronics, how to play a guitar, how to tie a tie, how to get divorced, about everything. They couldn't succeed. And they tried hard. So we know the guys, they sit in New York, they tried hard. And in that moment when they split the content onto new domains to become authorities in their space, immediately Google picked up this idea, and now they do well again. So now their visibility is almost as high as it was 5 years ago. So strategy number 1 is specialists, they really make it to the top. Number 2, content updates, and that's something that's quite easy. So we have a demo station or demo stations. We have a content marketing software that can help you with content updates. And the idea behind this, using data in a way that you can understand what does the market want, how should the text be structured, what kind of phrases you should use, what kind of length you should have, etc. And I mean, like best practices. And I take an example here from our own site. So we have a glossary since, I think, 10 years or so. Very typical, you want to create content, oh my God, just create a glossary. It's a very old SEO tactic. So we looked at the glossary. That's still the layout. It's like a link desert kind of thing here. But what we did is we have optimized the content that was already existing. And as you see here, the visibility increased pretty heavily from 290 to 1700. It's 480% increase. And that's just one example. Before it looked like this, very typical for a glossary, like, short text, nothing super fancy. And we have updated the text, we structured the text, we used only our own software. We looked at all the recommendations that came out of it. And this, caused the increase. And by the way, optimizing existing content is something that many people do not do, because the writers, the content writers itself, they're not incentivized and paid for optimizing what they wrote before. That's not the concept. They're mainly paid for new stuff, like new articles or new pieces of content. So optimizing something, that's not a typical thing in the head of the content creating people. Last strategy, and then I'm finished, is removing content. And the reason why this is also so important is because we are all a little bit messy. Not Lionel Messi, I mean messy in terms of we try to keep things, yeah? That's a different messy. So it means when we have created content, we are not removing it, we are not deleting it. And that's a big problem because it completely, takes away crawl equity, because Google needs to crawl the old stuff, or it maybe cannibalizes new content that we create. So here's one example of, it's just one, we have many, we have worked with many companies on these kind of tactics. We have helped them to identify their waste, and that's just one example. Urlaubsguru, they've deleted content, 95% to be honest, 95% of their content, and that led to an increase of 870% in visibility by removing content. At the same time, they optimized content a bit. That's just one keyword here, holiday Seychelles. But let me show you how the page looked before. So this is on the left, the one before they made the update. Looks very, like classical. It is visual, it's nice. But on the right, you see they put more images in it, made the text a little bit more appealing. And they just increased tremendously in positions. So it is really here. I know it's a shocker picture. It's on purpose because many people don't understand this concept of removing stuff, so you have to do it. You shouldn't cannibalize yourself. You should start capitalizing. The 3 takeaways: ranking factors, they are important, but only in the context of your industry or your niche, because they can be very different in your niche, so you have to look at them very specifically. Then splitting content up in thematic special entities can have a huge increase in your visibility. So if you are a company that owns and writes content in very different areas, you should really think about splitting the content onto different entities. That could lead to a big increase in visibility. And the last one, removing content can really improve your Google rankings, because if this content doesn't get any traffic anyway, it is waste anyway. So this is what you should think about, and thank you very much for your attention. Okay, so do you have questions? I know that was super fast. I'm very sorry, but I'm so excited about these examples and want to kind of spread the word. So you have questions? Yeah.
When you were talking about updating content and optimizing, how often do you think this? Thank you. Or how regular do you think this should be done?
That's a very good question. So it was about how often you should update the content when you follow this concept. And the answer, typical SEO answer is, it depends. That's the good thing in SEO. You can always say it depends. So, and the reason it depends here as well is because if it's very seasonal, so you kind of have something that changes quite often, the update should happen more often. If it's something, so let's take, for example, barbecue stuff. Barbecue season is already ongoing, so that's something where you maybe should just make an update once a year to really kind of focus on this is coming or this is the trend for the new Weber Grill whatsoever. If you have something that's happening more often, you should then have an update maybe every 3 months. And we did some tests with clients where we did updates monthly, and then with the same client we did updates every 3 months, and every 3 months was a little bit better for them because Google also needs to pick up the new content, reevaluate it, etc. So updating the content really depends on the demand for the content and this seasonality.
Thank you.
Do you want to know how we, how they picked, or we together picked the pages that we removed? Are you interested in how we did this? Okay, so it's quite simple. Everybody can do it, for themselves. So I guess you all use Google Analytics or some other analytics tool. So the first thing you should do is you should look at for all pages who didn't got traffic in the last 18 months. So the reason we picked 18 months is because when you pick 12 months, it could maybe happen that some pages who are a little bit seasonal, but kind of not in this 12 months window, you don't get. So we picked 18 months. So then we identified all pages who haven't got traffic in the last 18 months. Then all the URLs that were left, all the URLs that kind of like were not within these 18 months, we looked at rankings. Did these pages have some rankings? We used our API that are not kind of like on first page on Google. So we looked at, are there pages who actually still have potential but don't use the potential at the moment? So we took these URLs, or we included these URLs. And all the other URLs, we put in a big bucket where we looked at, okay, do these URLs have still backlinks? Are these URLs in certain areas? And kind of like, looked at rules for redirecting the URLs to category pages or other pages. And then the URLs or the others were just deleted. Quite simple. So you only need to follow some, processes, set some rules, and then you have to do it.
When you said
yeah.
Deleted, do you mean redirected?
Yeah, can you?
When you said deleted, did you mean redirected?
Yes and no. Some pages got completely deleted, and then you send 410 as a header, like that means gone, not 404. Then they're really gone. And some of them were redirected, especially the ones that were valuable, that had backlinks still. Then you want to kind of like transfer the link power to some other pages. But if you delete 95% of the pages, you can't redirect all of them, because for some of them, you just want to get rid of them. Because if they had no backlinks at all, they have no real value, then you should just delete them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing else. Come on, guys. Normally, people always ask in the audience, when can you create our ranking factor analysis? No one asked that. What's going on?
When can you create their ranking factor analysis?
Yeah, we are working on something like this. I definitely can say. I mean, we are super curious about all these different things, and we have just started in investing in all these niches. And if you follow Searchmetrics on social media or us, or go to the next summit, you will see updates on this, and I'm very certain and optimistic that for the next time you will see a very big improvement.
Hi, Marcus. Could you say any more about why it's so important to delete those pages? Is it just because Google has to work harder to go through your site with those wasteful pages?
Yes. Okay, so it's the same when you look at your house or your apartment and you look at stuff that you haven't used in the last, let's say, couple years. In that moment, when you get rid of the stuff, what happens? You free up stuff. You free up your room, it looks more organized, it looks better, more convenient, and you get rid of something you actually do not think about anymore. And it's the same with Google. So when Google crawls your waste, they need to invest crawl time. They crawl the content, they evaluate it, but you don't get any traffic from search and maybe from somewhere else. So you can delete it, and in that moment when you delete it, you give Google the clear signal that all the other pages that were left are more important. So that's called crawl equity. Likely some other speakers are going to talk about crawl equity today too. But it's a very simple concept. It's like putting more focus on the pages that you still have left on your page, and they get more attention, get crawled more often, get a higher focus, etc.
I think we have time for one last question, if there's another question.
Oh, there's one. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
What are the risks associated with domain splitting?
Can you repeat the question, please?
What are the risks associated with domain splitting?
I mean, so that's a very interesting question, and I could kind of follow into different arguments here. So there are risks involved, because when you split content onto different entities, you have to really think about how to brand the thing. You know, if you have a brand in a certain area and you take out content and you put it on a new domain, you have to think about a branding strategy. It should fit somehow. So this is really a risk, because you have to invest in how can you promote this brand, because it's not only about Google and rankings. But if you think about something clever like what they did with Very Well, have these sub brands that fit onto one main brand, then actually I don't see a risk. But the risk definitely is that you lose kind of like the connection to what you have created in the past. But the upside is very high, as you have seen with About.com, and they had nothing to lose, and the result is quite phenomenal for them.
All right.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you all. Enjoy the conference.